Living in a vehicle wasn't the plan. Not for most people, anyway. This wasn't something they grew up wanting. It wasn't a dream. It wasn't a goal. For a lot of people, this is just where they ended up after trying everything else first. And that difference matters because there's a big difference between choosing something and landing there because the old way stopped working. Online, nomad life usually gets shown one way: freedom, travel, minimalism, opting out. And for some people, that's real. But there's another side to this that doesn't show up as much, a much quieter side. People who didn't wake up wanting this life, people who didn't plan on it, people who adjusted into it one step at a time. Not because it sounded exciting, but because the other options kept disappearing. Adaptation isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with a big moment where everything suddenly changes. It looks like cutting back, then cutting back again. It looks like downsizing, then realizing there's nowhere left to downsize. It looks like roommates, then more roommates, then still coming up short. Living in a vehicle usually isn't the first move. It's the move that's left, when flexibility starts to matter more than space. You don't need panic for this to happen. You don't need some huge disaster. You just reach a point where budgeting harder doesn't really change anything. Rent keeps inching up. Groceries take more out of each paycheck. Utilities, insurance, basics, all a little higher. But income mostly stays the same. Eventually you realize you can't rearrange things anymore. There's nothing left to trim without giving something up completely. That's usually when people start rethinking housing. Now, this isn't just a feeling. When you look at the numbers, they line up with what people are actually dealing with. Over the last few years, rent has gone up much faster than wages in most parts of the country. Not just big cities, not just expensive areas. Pretty much everywhere. In a lot of places, rent jumped by hundreds of dollars a month, while pay barely moved at all. Groceries followed the same pattern. People didn't suddenly change how they eat. Food just costs more. Insurance costs more. Utilities cost more. When you stack all of that together, it slowly eats away at the space people used to have. Not luxury, just room to breathe. Recent estimates show that well over 300,000 people in the US are living full-time in vehicles like RVs, vans, boats. That number's a lot higher than it was just a few years ago. And that's not rare anymore. That's hundreds of thousands of people making the same kind of adjustment for the same basic reasons. In some cities, when officials count people without stable housing, about half of them are living in vehicles. Not tents. No, no. Not shelters. No. Cars. Vans. RVs. When that many people end up in the same place, it's not random. What surprises a lot of people is who is actually living this way. It's not just young people chasing freedom. It's not people who were already struggling. A lot of the people doing this had jobs, steady income, and housing not that long ago. People in their 30s, 40s, and beyond. People who were working, budgeting, planning. This isn't just a handful of people. It's a growing mix of everyday adults responding to the same pressure in similar ways. For some people, mobility starts to make sense. Not because it's ideal, not because it's easy, but because it lowers the biggest monthly expense. It creates options where there weren't any before. It buys time. Living in a vehicle, it's not about avoiding responsibility. It's about staying functional when the old setup stops being affordable. Now, this is also where wording matters. Van life gets treated like a trend. Nomad life is bigger than that. It includes vans, RVs, buses, cars, trailers. But more than that, it's about being able to move when being stuck starts to feel risky. Nomad life isn't about rejecting structure. It's about staying flexible when fixed systems stop working for a lot of people. That's not a trend. That is a reaction to pressure. What's interesting is how quietly all of this actually happens. People don't announce it. They don't make a big deal out of it. They just adjust. That's usually how change shows up first. In behavior, not headlines. By the time it's talked about openly, it's already been happening for a long time. And that is where we are now. I talk about this not to glamorize it, not to push it as a solution, but to acknowledge it. Because when people don't see their situation reflected anywhere, they start thinking it's just them. And it's not. A lot of people are quietly doing their best with the options that they have. That is also why Nomad Syndicate exists. Not as an answer, not as a pitch, but as a place to talk honestly about mobility, adaptation, and living in between systems. No hype, no pretending this is simple. Just people comparing notes and trying to figure things out. Living in a vehicle wasn't the plan, but adaptation usually isn't. It's just what people do when things change and they need to keep going. More people are doing that right now than most realize. And to be honest, it's worth paying attention to.